Are you interested in urban mining? Our summary today works with the article titled Potential and Relevance of Urban Mining in the Context of Sustainable Cities from 2017 by Rachna Arora, Katharina Paterok, Abhijit Banerjee, and Manjeet Singh Saluja, published in the IIMB Management Review Journal. This is a great preparation to our next interview with Don Weatherby in episode 316, talking about urban mining and the differences between recycling, reuse, and regeneration. Since we're investigating the future of cities, I thought it would be interesting to see the urban mining concept for better urban futures. This article introduces urban mining, the waste streams it can utilize, and some city planning initiatives utilizing this concept.
What is the future for cities? Do you want to learn more about them? Do you want to know how others think about them? Do you want to be part of the conversation? Then this is the right place.
Welcome to today's What is the Future for Cities podcast and its research episode. My name is Fanny, and today we will introduce a research by summarizing it. The episode really is just a short summary of the original investigation, and in case it is interesting enough, I would encourage everyone to check out the whole documentation. This conversation was produced and generated with Notebook LM as two hosts dissecting the whole research.
Today we're going deep into the fascinating world of urban mining. I've got to admit, when I first heard urban mining, I actually pictured prospectors with pickaxes roaming the street. But it turns out urban mining is way more fascinating than that. It's about seeing our cities themselves as these giant untapped mines, full of resources we often just throw away.
Urban mining is really about building a circular economy where we start seeing waste as a valuable resource instead of just trash.
So it's like those sci-fi stories where they recycle everything, but it's actually happening right now. So what exactly makes up these urban mines?
So the research paper highlights 5 main components. We have landfills, the buildings all around us, end-of-life vehicles, the waste we generate every day, and also electronic waste.
Okay, so let's break those down one by one, starting with landfills. We literally bury stuff in them. How can they be mined?
That's the cool part. It's called landfill mining. And the research actually looked at some experiments done in Mumbai and Chennai, analyzing what's actually in those landfills in India. And get this, they found a surprisingly low percentage of valuable metals.
Oh, that's interesting. I thought landfills would be overflowing with metal.
You would think, but it turns out India's informal sector is incredibly efficient at recovering those metals. You know those independent waste pitchers? They're like expert urban miners already.
Wow, that's amazing. So even before any kind of organized urban mining begins, there's already this sort of system in place. What about buildings? I guess when they get demolished, there's a lot of leftover material.
Yeah, we call that construction and demolition waste. And it's packed with reusable materials. And this is becoming even more important as we try to reduce the negative impacts of traditional stone quarrying and sand mining. And get this, the research paper says India produces about 500 million tons of this waste every year.
500 million tons. To put that into perspective for our listeners, that's like the weight of, I don't even know, a small lemon range.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a huge amount of potential resources just waiting to be tapped.
It would be amazing if we could use that waste to build new structures, like giving these materials a second life. Okay, what about all the vehicles reaching the end of their life?
That's what we call end-of-life vehicles. And with India's booming automotive industry, those numbers are staggering. The research paper projects that by 2025, there will be 22 million of these vehicles in India alone. And get this, 80% of them will be two-wheelers.
Two-wheelers. That really paints a picture of the streets in India, all those scooters and motorcycles. And imagine all the metal that can be recovered from them.
Exactly. It's a huge opportunity. But the research also points out that India doesn't really have a comprehensive system in place to manage these vehicles in an environmentally sound way when they reach their end of life.
So the potential is there, but the infrastructure needs to catch up. All right, moving on to something we all deal with every day. Municipal solid waste, the everyday trash.
And India is facing a serious challenge with that. The research indicates it could exceed 200 million tons by 2030.
200 million tons. So what can be done? Are there ways to turn that trash into something valuable?
That's where things get interesting. The research paper points out this kind of irony. India has this huge amount of organic waste that's ideal for composting, but it's often overlooked. At the same time, the informal sector is already doing a fantastic job recovering recyclables, like paper, plastic, and glass.
It's like having a gold mine right under your nose and focusing on something else entirely. What would it take to integrate the informal sector into the official waste management system?
It's a complex question, no easy answers, but the potential benefits are enormous for the environment and the economy. And speaking of potential gold mines, let's talk about electronic waste.
E-waste, the mountains of old phones, computers, and everything in between. It feels like everyone has a drawer full of old gadgets they don't know what to do with.
It really is a global issue, and the research highlights that India is the third largest e-waste generator in the world.
Third largest? That's got to be a major environmental concern, right?
Definitely, but it's also a massive economic opportunity. E-waste contains precious metals like gold, copper, nickel, things that are in high demand. But the challenge is that in India, the informal sector really dominates this area, which can lead to improper handling and a loss of those valuable metals.
It sounds like there's a delicate balance to strike, tapping into the knowledge and efficiency of the informal sector, but also ensuring responsible and sustainable practices.
One thing we're really seeing here is that urban mining isn't just about technology and economics. It's also really deeply connected to social and political factors, especially in a rapidly developing country like India.
We were just talking about the informal sector's huge role in waste management, a system with both pros and cons.
Yeah, exactly. And the research paper highlights several key challenges to urban mining in India. One of the biggest is simply space. When you think about these really overcrowded cities, where do you even put the facilities for collecting and sorting and processing all this material?
It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. And even if you find the space, there's still the issue of capacity within the urban local bodies. A lot of them are struggling to keep up with the current waste management demands, let alone implementing something as complex as urban mining.
You need more than just the physical infrastructure. You need expertise funding and organizational capacity. And then there's the whole issue of the informal sector, this massive workforce that's already embedded in the waste management system.
Yeah, the research paper mentioned that in Delhi alone, there are almost 100,000 people employed in informal waste management.
Wow.
That's a huge number. And it seems like they're already doing a lot of the urban mining in their own way.
Absolutely. They have the knowledge, the skills, the networks to recover these valuable materials, but their work often lacks the safety regulations and environmental safeguards that you would see in a more formalized system.
So it's this balancing act, right? Figuring out how to integrate them into a system that's both sustainable and socially just.
Exactly. And a successful integration could mean a significant boost to the economy, job creation, and a cleaner environment for everyone. Which leads to another important question. How do we move from theory to practice?
We've talked about the what and the why of urban mining, but I'm curious about the how. Are there any real-world examples we can learn from?
Yes, fortunately, the research paper highlights some inspiring international examples. Like the European Union, for instance. They've been real pioneers in promoting a circular economy.
So an entire continent is embracing this idea.
It's pretty amazing.
Are there any specific countries that stand out?
Germany has some really comprehensive resource efficiency programs that have shown some really impressive results. There are also some really interesting cases of public-private partnerships, where you see governments and businesses working together to make urban mining a reality.
That's encouraging. What can we learn from these successful examples? Are there any strategies that have been particularly effective?
I think one key takeaway is the importance of a clear vision and a comprehensive plan. You need to know what resources you have locally, identify the key waste streams, and set realistic goals. And it's really crucial to involve everyone in the process. Government agencies, businesses, the informal sector, and the community itself.
It sounds like a true community effort. The research paper also mentioned a couple of specific cities, Berlin and Bottrop in Germany.
Oh, yeah.
What have they done?
Berlin has made some major stride in improving air quality and reducing its carbon footprint. And they've done that partly through urban mining initiatives. And Bottrop, which used to be a traditional mining town, has completely reinvented itself as a model of sustainable urban development.
It's so inspiring to see cities turning what could be seen as environmental challenges into opportunities, creating jobs and improving the quality of life for residents. It proves that a circular economy isn't just some far-off dream, but is it only possible on a citywide scale?
That's a great question, and it actually leads to something that's been on my mind throughout this discussion, something that the research paper didn't explicitly address. What if we could scale it down? Could we apply these principles in our own homes and neighborhoods?
Oh, that's an interesting thought. So instead of massive industrial processes, we could be looking at individual actions to make a difference.
Exactly. It's about looking at everything around us with a fresh perspective.
This is getting me excited. But before we go down that rabbit hole, could you give us a little preview? What might that look like? How can our listeners start thinking about those principles in their own lives? Can we really bring the principles of urban mining into our own homes?
Yeah, it's about realizing that a circular economy isn't just for big companies or governments. It's something we can all actually live by.
Okay, but how do we actually do that? Where do we even begin?
It starts with a simple mindset shift, really. Instead of looking at waste as something to just throw away, we need to start seeing it as a resource. Think about what you typically throw away: food scraps, packaging, old clothes, electronics.
Yeah, I'm definitely guilty of tossing stuff in the trash without thinking twice. But if we're trying to think like urban miners, what are some ways we can actually give those items a second life?
Composting is a great place to start. It's a fantastic way to reduce food waste and create nutrient-rich soil for your garden. You can even do it in a small apartment with a countertop compost bin. And when it comes to packaging, try to choose products with minimal packaging or packaging that can be easily recycled.
Yeah, those are good starting points. I've also been trying to buy less stuff in general and repair things whenever possible. It's amazing what you can fix with a little bit of know-how.
Absolutely. Repairing and repurposing are essential parts of a circular economy. Instead of throwing out a broken appliance or a piece of furniture, see if you can fix it or give it a new purpose. Get creative.
It's like turning trash into treasure. But what about electronics? They seem a bit more complicated.
Yeah, they can be, but there are definitely options. A lot of electronics retailers and manufacturers have take-back programs for old devices. And some communities even organize e-waste recycling events, so you can safely dispose of your electronics. The key is to do your research and make sure your e-waste is handled responsibly.
So it sounds like there's a lot we can do on an individual level. But what about on a neighborhood level? How do we create these mini circular economies?
That's where community engagement becomes really important. You could organize clothing swaps or tool-sharing libraries where neighbors can exchange items instead of buying new ones. Or maybe set up a system for collecting and composting food scraps from multiple households.
I love those ideas. It's all about working together and sharing resources.
Exactly. If you have a local farmer's market, you could talk to the vendors about collecting their food scraps for composting. They reduce their waste and the community gets valuable compost.
It's amazing how many possibilities open up once you start thinking this way. We started by imagining cities as giant mines, but now we're seeing that each of us can be urban miners in our own way.
Yeah, it's all about shifting our mindset from waste to resource and realizing that even small actions can contribute to a more sustainable future.
Who knew that digging into the potential of waste could be so inspiring? Now go out there and be the change you want to see in the world. Maybe start by composting or organizing a clothing swap, or even just repairing something instead of throwing it away. Every little step counts.
What is the Future for Cities podcast?